Welcome to Spirit, Purpose, and Energy. I'm JJ Flazanes, your host, and thank you for downloading today's episode. We are getting close to Thanksgiving, and there are so many things to appreciate and be grateful for. And I hope that if you're someone who isn't on our manifestation challenge, or you haven't purchased the manifestation starter kit, you're someone that at least in this month might be doing some kind of gratitude practice, appreciation journal, appreciation game, because the best way to create momentum in a positive way to attract more things is to have a practice. And I know last week we had abundance and intuition with Mae McCarthy, and that's definitely one of the main points that I want to remind you about, is that it's what we do every day. It's what energy are we keeping going? Where's the momentum? Is it positive momentum or negative momentum? And the only way to really create a nice, strong, positive momentum is to do something every day that directs you in that fashion. Otherwise, we're sort of susceptible to things that come along from, friends and family, and we can be thrown off our center place very easily. So I just want to encourage you to have a practice of some kind. In fact, I am starting a manifestation mastermind, and it's only going to be 20 people. I'm going to offer it to the people in the group first, and then in the manifestation challenge, and to the people who are already on my list. And if you are not either of those, but you really want it, then reach out to me somehow. It will be very, 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 very affordable. It's going to be a 6-month mastermind for only 20 people, using the law of attraction, using this abundance and intuition, and supporting each other and getting more personalized one-on-one, group-on-one coaching from me as well. So let me know if you're interested in that. Today's show, Improving Sex in Your Relationship, is a very needed show for everybody. And Doug and I have been talking a lot about enlightened sex on Women, Men, and Relationships. So if you haven't heard those conversations, go head over to Women, Men, and Relationship and download some of those podcasts where he and I get pretty candid about the kind of things we're learning and the kind of things we're talking about and experiencing and the things we're comparing to and wanting in the future. And Dr. Jane's one of those people who we would work with and that you might want to work with as well before it's too late. Because I actually thought that when you didn't have chemistry with somebody, like really, really strong sexual chemistry, that maybe that was an indication of something. And she said that there is hope in so many situations. So I hope you enjoy today's show with Dr. Jane Gwynn. She is a nationally known sex expert with a PhD in human sexuality. She's the Amazon bestselling author of Too Busy to Get Busy and the creator of the transformational bedroom model. Because Dr. Jane's been married to her best friend Jim for over 30 years, she understands the challenges of creating a satisfying, erotic life in the middle of all the distractions. Although things haven't always been perfect, they have better sex now than they did when they almost got caught making out in a conference room at the country hospital where they first met. Welcome to the show, Dr. Jane.
I am so happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you. This topic is very juicy. For those of you that heard the bio reading of Dr. Jane's background, you're probably very excited to have this, literally very excited to have this conversation because it's not often that we have intelligent, really mindful and helpful conversations, healthy conversations about sex. I mean, on my show we have, but not that much. And I've heard you on other people's podcasts before, and I know you're really great and I love what you do. So let's just start off from the beginning. And how did you get into the work of dealing with just sex?
Yeah, I get asked that question all the time, and it's an interesting question because behind the question is this sense of like, how did somebody like you get into this? And I totally get that because I'm, just a regular appearing person. I've got a whole big family, 6 kids actually. Can you believe that? We've got like 6 kids grown up and growing kids, some of them adopted, some not. So we're kind of that family that looks like middle America. I'm, way past 50, been married over 30 years. And people look at me and they think, like, how did somebody like you become like a sex coach? How did that happen? And it's been an interesting journey. It actually started during the time when I was a super mom as a mom in the Midwest. being more interested in Girl Scout cookies and making the ultimate dinosaur, paper mache dinosaur Halloween costume for one of my kids than I really was into the topic that I'm so passionate about right now.
So I have to say that it's not because you look like, the normal sort of happy mom who's clean cut that I thought, how did you get into sex? I really want to know the background story of obviously something led you to, because we're all where you are or have been in terms of there's some kind of contrast that had to happen to focus you in a way, right?
Totally.
Into what it is about sex. And I think let's break that down for people, because it's not that I would think someone who was a sex expert necessarily had to look a certain way. So I get that you think maybe some people think that way, but for me, it's why the subject of sex. Now, I could say why the subject of sex, but I want to know your why of how you got into really just focusing, not just focusing, but why the sex.
Yeah. How did it happen in my life specifically? So when I first met my husband, and again, we've been married over 30 years and have a fantastic relationship now. When I met him, we were that smoking hot couple, couldn't keep our hands off each other. We actually, just had this tremendous chemistry, and we spent a lot of time writing even passionate letters to each other when we weren't in person. And it was just a really, really juicy, really sexy, super, super engaging, erotic relationship. And then we ended up getting married, and it was still fantastic. And I really felt like our relationship was completely different than others. I felt like, I had that kind of entitled, like, we've got the relationship and nothing is ever going to happen to the spark that's between us. So what ended up happening, though, is we ended up with this family, a wonderful family. I ended up becoming so connected to my role and to my work as both a mom and as a small business owner. I was also, a volunteer in the community, all the things that a lot of women do, daycare, all the different pieces of being a busy mom and a busy woman with lots of connections to other women in the community. And our community really didn't support conversation about or really connection around how to hold an erotic life together while we were doing everything else. And as it turned out, JJ, I ended up getting kind of even like irritable. I was so unifaceted in my life. It was not well filled out in all the different areas, like my spiritual life, my physical life, all these pieces were kind of lacking. And I was completely in service to this role as a mom. And then Jim, my husband, I just absolutely love him. But at the time, he was working really hard. I was kind of irritable. I was kind of totally into the supermom role. And it turned out that somebody in his life was not as irritable as I was and was feeding him a lot of positives where I was irritable. And they ended up having what I now call an affair. Technically, for the layperson, it's called an emotional affair, but really it was a sexy relationship that they had together. And that is an affair, even though they didn't apparently get naked. It didn't really matter to me. I ended up feeling completely devastated that our relationship that had been so erotic and so powerful for me in terms of being the one and having the relationship, when I realized that we'd fallen off that way and he'd ended up with this connection with another woman, really having a lot of conversations with her, he actually kissed her, I was just blown away. And that's when I decided to start looking at, like, what happened to me? What happened to us? How did I end up being Molly mom, not having any sense of who I was as a sexual person anymore, and let that part of my life completely fade away so that he ended up with this other thing in his life.
Well, I think a lot of women can relate to that. Those who have been married, even for a short number of years, I know that those of us that are career driven tend to get in the masculine, which then, of course, like you said, he was getting his needs met emotionally somewhere else because there wasn't any room or space or room for where you were for him. Right. And but that's all. I mean, I want to say that's all of us. How many people actually do it right the first time? I mean, or do it or are completely balanced unless they're housewives. And even then, I mean, I grew up with my mother who didn't work, but she didn't leave space for femininity or an intimacy. She was always busy helping other people. So it didn't really matter that she didn't have a quote unquote career. I watched her overgive to other people and not necessarily give to herself or create sacred space for her relationship. I think that the example of women today, there's a need for this balance and there's a need for sensuality and femininity along with the power of the working, passionate, on purpose woman who doesn't allow herself to get bogged down with the masculine energy and deny herself that sensuality and that connection time with her husband. So I can see, I mean, I know there's a need for what you do. Definitely. I just wanted to know your specific story because I don't think anybody gets into anything that they really focus on with any kind of purpose if they haven't experienced some kind of contrast in that area, because it really, I think, shines the light on what we need to learn and what other people need to learn too.
You're so right about that. And being kind of empty in that area, not feeling erotic as a woman was a huge loss for me. And I'm not saying that we did not have a sex life, because we did. It's just that the prioritization was really skewed toward this whole mothering energy. And the way that I used my mind was completely driven toward my role in the masculine, even as a masculine kind of acting mom. So I was like all about running my kids' schedules and all the tests they were taking and everything else in the household, which of course makes sense because it was a busy household. I'm not blaming myself. It's just something that ended up really limiting me in my whole expression of who I am. And that was the loss that the two of us felt, was I kind of receded. And in reaction to that, he receded, or maybe he receded and I receded at the same time. It was a very interesting dynamic that we shared there.
So after this had happened, I first want to say, obviously, congratulations and thank you for, it sounds like, owning sort of your part in that, right? So that way it wasn't, because I would imagine that that would be grounds for a lot of women and or men to say, well, you cheated and I'm out of here. And there's no learning in that. There's no growing in that. There's no responsibility in that, because in any relationship, it takes two people that create that dynamic. And a lot of people want to take the victim card and say, well, he cheated on me and that was the end of that. Or she cheated on me and that's the end of that. But that isn't the end of that. There's everything that led up to it to create that. So what are some of the, and we need to get to sex here, but the emotional piece is really important, because the sex, I think the better sex is going to come when the emotional connection is there. So we're not talking about just sex on a surface level, but on a deeper, intimate, and to truly be intimate, there has to be trust. And so how did you get that trust back? How did you deal with that at that time?
Right. So you're so right that what we did was what many couples do, and we went to counseling. And our counselor she was a good counselor. She taught us to communicate better, and she helped us think about our families of origin, kind of our history, and we got through it. But I must say that her work with us did not focus on the sexual piece, the erotic piece. And that actually inspired me to figure out a way for someone to assist couples who are in this kind of dynamic, because there was such a sexual piece to it. But talking about our moms and when we were kids didn't completely cover it. So that inspired me to become a sex coach, which is what I technically am. And then I ended up with this PhD in human sexuality. So I'm a sex doctor too, which is kind of fun. But her work with us, while it was helpful, was not really enough for us. We kind of made our way through the process, even though the therapy or the counseling that we got was somewhat limited.
Well, I've definitely had the experience with different kinds of therapies. I have lots of different opinions on therapies, and which ones are actually effective and which ones are not necessarily. And it's per individual, which leads me to ask you, and maybe it's in my mind, maybe it's just because of the sex conversation. You're not a Scorpio, are you?
No, I'm a Capricorn.
Okay, Capricorn. Okay, and what's your husband?
He is, okay, he's born November 21st. Does that make him
Scorpio Sag. He's somewhere in
yeah.
this, he's like
Hmm.
cuspy. So the Capricorn Scorpio combination astrologically is a really great sexual combination. And so I'm just curious because, I've experienced different kinds of sexual chemistry in the course of my life. And I can say right now that I'm excited about the newest one, but it's what it has shown a light on for me is, again, that sexual chemistry piece. And a lot of people, I think, deny and don't want to be rooted in that the only connection is sexual. Like, you can't tell if you're compatible because the sex is so good. Or, have you found in your work and with people, because it sounds like you guys had sexual compatibility off the bat and you were compatible. What about for people who love each other but don't have a great sex life or don't have the sex life they want? Like, it's not bad, but it's not awesome. And it's definitely it's less than what they want it to be. What are the chances for those kinds of couples to work it out and do some of the work that you do to transform that?
Yeah, so that question comes up quite often, and people tend to give up before they've fully exhausted the possibilities. There are couples where they've done everything they can and they've made a lot of effort and they're still not able to get what they want. And sometimes those people decide to take another path. But for so many people, JJ, they just haven't even scratched the surface of what could happen between them because they don't even have the words. They don't have any of the skills or techniques or a conceptual framework to use so that they can figure out, like, what is it about you that is absolutely delicious that I need to know if I'm going to be able to invite you in a way that you feel like, oh yeah, that's it. That's it. Because so often we don't even know how to begin the invitation, and that initiation is the problem for so many couples. And that's what chemistry helps us with. It gets us into the engaged moment, into the sex, into the juicy, wonderful deliciousness of it. But when we don't know how to get across the gap to the other, it tends to be really tough. And people, when they learn these techniques and learn how to kind of have a conversation outside of the bedroom so that they know what their partner actually desires, they can take those pieces and then they can, that people have skills and abilities that they use in every single part of their life, right? But they just don't know how to apply them to a sexual dynamic. That's what I help them do, is use their creativity and use their communication skills in a way that allows them to have something completely awesome, even if the initial chemistry is somewhat limited.
Okay, that's great news. And then what about those who have a lot of shame wrapped around that? Even wrapped around, I mean, how do you get somebody who's got shame? Let's take a man not pleasing a woman, and he knows that, and she can't help him figure out what to do, but makes some suggestions that he doesn't feel comfortable with. There's that defeatist. I feel defeated. I'm a failure. I'm not good enough. How do you move from the shame part of even looking at it or even needing somebody like you? Like, what I mean? There, to some guys and women, it might be like, they might say, oh my God, I can't tell anybody. I'm like that. I'm not a man if I can't please my woman. And why would I admit to, and how bad does it have to be for me to go see a sex therapist? Somebody's going to help me have better sex. I mean, how do you deal with that?
Well, that is the key question right there, because so many people, first of all, they have huge shame. So many of us, I would say the vast majority of us, have had zero invitation to talk about sex. So we feel automatically kind of weird about it, if not, really embarrassed, really ashamed about talking about sex. So it's super, super common for people to have the experience you're describing. And when people are feeling that kind of shame, they don't want to say what they desire. They don't want to ask what their partner desires. And they're frightened that maybe the partner is, definitely dissatisfied and there's no way to fix it. That's the key piece, is that, yes, I know that my partner's dissatisfied and there's no way to fix it, because people have these assumptions about what their partner wants, and they think that these things are set in stone. for example, maybe a guy has decided that it's all about his penis size. His penis size is, maybe he feels it's not adequate, whatever that is to him. And that's the thing that would make her happy if he had a different shape, size, whatever penis. And he can't change that. And so he doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't even want to ask what's going on, because it may be something like, you know what, your body isn't it for me. So we're going to have to break up. And there's so much shame around that. So because that's like the ultimate nightmare for a guy, he won't ask the other things like, how do you like me to kiss you? Do you want me to kiss you with my mouth open? Do you like this type of kissing? Do you like this kind? Am I kind of swamping you when I kiss you? How do I invite you to touch me? How would you like me to touch you? Do you like me to touch your hands and feet? Would you like me to rub your head? There's so many things that have zero to do with penis size that he could be asking. But because of that nightmarish feeling that she's going to say that that's the thing that's not good enough, he just won't even bring up the topic.
So give me a scenario of how people actually start working with you and get to that place, because I can see so many examples of, let's see, on that side, like the men's fear or the women's fear that they're not attractive enough or skinny enough or in that way, or aren't performing well enough. And so all this unspoken stuff, because, you know, what you just described with all those questions in the years and the partners over the years, there's only like a very few of them that would even ask any questions. I mean, my first sexual experience was with someone who was my boss and was 8 years older. And I just assumed he had all this experience, and it wasn't it was not a good experience necessarily. I had feelings for him, but I remember once looking at him after, I don't know, we've been having sex for months. And I literally looked at him and I said to him, as he was moving me around in different positions, I said, is this for me or for you? Now, mind you, I'm 21. I lost my virginity at 21 and he's 28 or something, or 29. And I'm living in New York City by myself, and I have no experience with sex. I've had partners that have done other things, but you know, I'm not confident at all about any of that. And I'm intimidated. And I finally look at him and say, is this for me or for you? And he says, it's for you. And I said, well, you might want to ask me if it's working. I mean, I never had an orgasm. He never asked me. He never he never did things to please me in a way that I could actually experience. So I got the message very early on that my pleasure wasn't important. And so where do people have to get to? Is it divorce? Is it cheating? That they come to you and say, that they're ready. Obviously, a lot of people need this. It's the difference of whether they want to take action on it. So tell me about who comes and what are the breaking points if I'm ready to take action on it?
Yeah, sadly, it's oftentimes people who are really facing divorce. She's had an affair and he knows about it. They've been to therapy and it's maybe a 3 or 4 year affair, and she's decided she'll stay with him because they've got kids, the kids are out of the house, and they just don't want to break up the rest of their life. Most of the people who work with me, JJ, are really good friends. They get along great, but the sex is just terrible or non-existent. So these are the kind of the tip of the iceberg. The number of people who would benefit from this type of work there's just millions of us. But the people who actually come to talk with me are usually people who've been married more than 20 years. They're over 50 years old, and they're facing divorce if they don't fix the sex thing. That's how bad it's getting for people before they'll have this conversation, which is really, really sad when you think about it. That's, for me, I love my work because there's so much potential for so many people just to start beginning to have this conversation so that they don't become that couple. For example, I have a couple right now, they're in their 70s, and it's never been good. And now they want to try, but it's like so much lost opportunity. So if you're listening right now and you're not in your 70s, married, many, many decades, do yourself a favor, give yourself the gift of starting to think about how to make your sex life fantastic, because it can be fantastic, even if you're in the middle of so much chaos and disruption in your life. In fact, it will help your life. It will help you feel more alive, empowered, happy, stressless. Take your stress level down. Start having great sex. It's just it's cheap. It's free. Most of us have the license. If you're married, you've got a license. Why not use it?
No, that's great advice. And I think before New Media Summit, I think, I know about certain programs. I've done programs in the past, Sex, Passion, and Enlightenment and different illumination intensives. And I mean, Sex, Passion, and Enlightenment was about more of sensuality and masculine and feminine energy, but wasn't about sex. And I know people have mentioned sex therapists, and I knew about that, but in looking at relationships, even relationships that aren't even in trouble, but you're just not having, you're not having great sex.
Mm-hmm.
And because there are really some ramifications for not having good sex in your marriage or in your relationships, because I think we put ourselves on the back burner. And like you said, it's probably the best stress reliever and way to get in your body and to get connected and to feel on purpose. And it's just, there's so many benefits, like health benefits and life benefits to sex besides just the enjoyment piece. This isn't just for that. So what would you say are like the top 3 biggest complaints people have that you deal with that are maybe not easy fixes, but they're not going to take years and years of work?
Okay, I would go back to the kissing thing. When people ask me, like, what's one thing you wish people would do to fix their sex life, I always talk about kissing, because it's the gateway drug to great sex. Having the ability to kiss your partner the way he or she loves being kissed. I mean, wow, that's just fantastic. But so many of us just, first of all, we don't kiss at all, or we have these pecks that are completely non-erotic. You could have the same kiss with your sister that you have with your wife in most cases. And so I encourage people to really start to explore that oral connection just with kissing each other on the mouth. You can move to kissing each other on the neck. And for women, we hold our eroticism really in the periphery. So the neck, the head, the hair, the face, the mouth, and interestingly, the hands, the arms, and the feet. That's where women tend to hold their erotic energy just when we're walking around in life, which is why when you look at what women do, we go to the nail salon, lots of us. We get our hands massaged and anointed. We get our hair done. We like having, our backs rubbed, our shoulders rubbed. Whereas guys hold their erotic energy in the core, in the midline. And what do when they want to be sexy? They send us a dick pic, right? They send us a picture of their genitals because they think that's it. Because that's it for them. And
Right.
That's why they grab us in the core. They grab our breasts, they grab our groin, and we're not ready. We're like, what are you doing? What are you doing? That's not where I am right now for most of us. So I encourage people to start at the periphery, start kissing, if you're having sex with a woman, which a lot of people are having sex with a woman. If you're having sex with a woman and you're listening to me talk right now, think about the fact that she loves to have her hands just gently stroked. If you're listening to this and you're a woman, just go ahead and take your fingers and very lightly rub your hand or just stroke your fingers on the palm of your hand and then up your arm a little bit. And you'll notice it's just a beautiful erotic feeling for a woman, whereas most men are just kind of ho-hum about that. So start kissing, start focusing on the periphery, on the hands, feet, head, neck of your woman, and you'll start to melt away a little bit of the resistance to connection, particularly if you don't focus on quickly going to sex. Because when I say sex, I mean penis and vagina, intercourse sex. That's what ends up happening is a lot of people, they start with some, what we used to call foreplay, but now we call erotic play. So they start with some erotic play, which I highly recommend, but then they move quickly to intercourse and they want to, have sex. And that oftentimes ruins the sense of being able to kind of melt into an erotic connection for couples where they haven't had a lot of passion in their relationship for kind of a long time.
I absolutely know exactly what you're talking about. And a lot of women, I'm sure, also do, because I would think the biggest complaint I know I've heard is that, and I've heard this said in this way, that women are like ovens and men are like blowtorches. So, in terms of you mentioned the core and the erotic factor, like men get turned on quickly and are ready to go, and women take a little bit longer. And like you said, get turned on differently. And I would also say it's probably a lot of more mental for women than it is physical. Would you agree with that?
I think that I think both parties use their minds for eroticism. One of the things that happens with those of us who are women is we don't spend perhaps as much time as we could or should in erotic thoughts as guys do. It's not as socially acceptable for us to, be in fantasies, share fantasies with friends. We're not socialized that way as much as men are. And we don't spend as much time looking at erotic materials or reading erotic materials as men do. So I'm not sure that I think men do spend a lot of time thinking about sex for sure. They spend a lot of time thinking about it. And I do think that we're kind of playing catch up with that. So if we spent the amount of time thinking about it that they do, I don't know, we might be fairly even in terms of the mental energy we put into sex. For women, I think there's this sense of wanting to be melted, wanting to be really fully present and not rushed. There's a rush piece, and you're totally right, JJ, about that what you said about the blowtorch and the crock pot, because we get rushed a lot. And when I talk to groups, that's one of the things I discuss is like why men fail at sex. The third reason that they fail at sex is they rush the sale. They push it too fast. And they've done a beautiful job of, kind of, the seduction may not be the right word, but inviting a partner into sex, inviting their woman. But then when it comes right down to it, instead of allowing her to open like a beautiful flower that's just welcoming him and her, just beautifully, deliciously ready for him, he pushes past that and doesn't allow her to just bring him in a way that is fully embodied for her. And all of a sudden now she's not there anymore. She's like, hey, wait a minute, I wasn't ready then. And we of course have lots of examples of how that happens in a really toxic way in society where people have been pushed and forced into sex, so horribly in many, many situations that we've discussed so much this year. But I'm not talking about that dynamic right now. I'm talking about even in a loving relationship, he doesn't wait to let her really open to him and welcome him and then, give him this opportunity to, with vigor to take her. But with a willingness, with a opening that she's provided for him and that he's allowed her to have as he has welcomed her eroticism and not pushed it past where she's ready.
We've opened Pandora's box into all kinds of things that need to be addressed that I'm like, wow, okay, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And I know that you have a book and that you work with people, and I know you also have a free gift for them. So why don't you let us know how to find you, work with you, and get whatever you have to offer?
Wonderful. So you can find me at janegwynn.com, and my name is spelled Guyn. It's a weird spelling. And I have a gift for you. Perfect. So it's janegwynn.com/feel like your sexy self. And you'll find a piece that you can work on and understand yourself better so that you are ready to invite a partner yourself. It's great for women. If you're a guy listening to this, go ahead and download that free gift and you can share it with a woman. I'd love that for you. And I'd also invite our listeners to have a conversation with me. And to do that, you can call me. My phone number is 612-564-9920. So it's 612-564-9920. You can call me or you can text me, and I will be happy to have a conversation with you about your relationship.
Wow. Okay. So definitely I would take her up on both of those offers and, get the free gift and look that over. And if you're really in a pickle or just don't want to be in one, please give her a call so that way she can help you. And, my audience is really good about when I have really great guests on who have lots of value that they always follow through with that. So I'm sure we'll be hearing from some people, and I'm sure we'll be having more conversations like this in the future, because it's such a huge topic and it's such an important piece, can be broken down into so many different things. And I know you're a wealth of knowledge, and I wish I would have met you a long time ago to had you on the show and to, show people the way into what's possible, and to give people hope in their relationships, and to help people even get to another level that maybe they think isn't possible. I think work is not for people in trouble, but work for everyone. You want a great sex life? Call Dr. Jane.
Absolutely. Look forward to talking to you guys.